Steel, the Blue Hulk as I call him, is a fantastic tank and support hero. His ultimate is definitely one of the best in the game, and using it effectively could be the difference between winning and losing. There are a couple ways you can build Steel. Since he scales like a fighter, I have seen a lot of people building him straight damage, and while this may seem like a good idea, you're really not helping your team out by doing this. Steel should be in the front line, absorbing damage, taking hits from the enemy carries, while your own carries pick them off. As always, I'm going to give you my build and then a guide on how to play Steel and use his kit to your advantage. First, you want to get his prime card. Now I suggest the Centurion, but you could get the Warlord if you feel like you'd like the damage. Next we take our standard items, a health potion, mana potion and scout's ward. We take the scout's ward because we'll usually be supporting someone in lane, and having a ward early in the game will help us spot any ganks since a lot of teams like to roam as a 4 in the early stages. I then have a barrier token, guard token and a strike token. These are for the early game tankiness or damage if we need it. We then want to take our Lord's Key because it's nice to help our jungler out with harvesters. I also put 3 lesser healths into the Lord's Key so that if you need it, you have some early game health, since we only really build into health towards the late game. You probably won't need it this early, but flexibility is a good thing. You're only investing 3 points, so it can be helpful, especially if you decide to jungle, since the minions do hurt quite a bit. A Lord's Ward, or in fact any ward item, is a must pick because, as I've said countless times, wards save lives. We want to put 3 healths into the Lord's Wards because we want to keep the wards in the late game. This will allow our carries to focus on maximizing their damage. I do advise taking wards early on in the game, but don't worry about fully upgrading the card because it has no maxed bonus. Lord's Ward is one of the last cards that I upgrade. Next we have a tempered plate with a guard, health and a greater health, a tuned barrier with a barrier, health and greater health, a Windcarver blade with double minor strike and a minor kinetic because this will allow us to farm the jungle and clear waves throughout the game without having to spend too many points. I often discard my Windcarver blade in the late game when I'm near 60 card points. A second Windcarver blade with a strike, kinetic and a major strike because if the enemy team only have one damage type like physical, you might as well build into damage rather than energy armor, which would be pointless. We then have our Etherweave mesh for armor and cooldown reduction with 2 greater barriers and a barrier. We also have the physical counterpart, quantum casing with 2 greater guards and a guard. I really like these 2 cards because the cooldown reduction is awesome. This will allow you to utilize Steel's abilities a lot more, but also give you the survivability that you need. I then have Shockwave. Now this card has no replacement, but it's a pretty much must have on Steel. Shockwave is an active card that when activated emits a shockwave that knocks up nearby enemy heroes. This card can be comboed with your ult for maximum destruction. If you don't have a shockwave, I suggest getting more damage or health. Some cards that I think are quite good and could be useful on Steel are cards like Barrier of Will, which I probably would include in this deck, except I don't have it. Honor the Pure is another card one might choose for Steel, although I'm on the fence with this card because Barrier of Will is better if you have it, and Offensive Maneuvers for early game armor is not a bad call either. So if you don't have the cards in my build, you can utilize some of these other cards, or even if you do have all the cards in my build, you can experiment with some of these cards. So from this build we get 308 armor from both physical and energy. This might be too much, but I found anything less and I'm getting deleted quite quickly in the late game. We get 22.5% cooldown reduction, so with the blue buff we'll easily be hitting that 40% mark. We get around 1.9k health, which is a really good amount, allowing you to sustain in fights, and then of course we have a tiny bit of mana regen from the Shockwave. All of this is without the stats leveling up from your hero level, so in-game health and armor is going to be considerably higher. I will say with Steel, ideally you want 3 decks. This deck that we talked about would cover you if you are playing both energy and physical carries, but you might want a second deck with more physical armor if you're only against physical heroes, and a third one for energy armor. I rarely see one team going all physical or energy, but it does happen and it's better to be prepared. So let's talk build order. You want to start with your health, mana and Scout's Ward. I usually back and then get my Lord's Ward to help my laning partner and a Lord's Key to help my jungler. I recommend you check my jungler's guide so you can learn more about what you should be doing and the timings, but you definitely want to try and grab the 3-minute harvester and at the very least the 6-minute harvester in your lane. I also discard my Scout's Ward and put in a strike token for some extra damage. You can use the barrier token or guard token if you feel it's appropriate. I like to place my wards around here and then a deeper ward near their white camp so my allies have time to retreat. Once you grab both these cards, you can start building into some damage. Go for your Windcarver blade with all 1-cost upgrades and max that out as soon as possible. Now you can either jungle or start pushing waves with your allies. You'll notice in the video that I actually went for Shockwave first. This is because I thought it would be beneficial for my team to have that early Shockwave. Now this is why I stress flexibility in a build. Once you have your keys and wards, you can go damage first or Shockwave or even armor. I recommend the first two though. You can also skip keys if your team already have enough of them, which would mean you can get Shockwave and damage quicker. Also remember that Shockwave allows you to interrupt abilities like Gideon's ult, so definitely use that if a Gideon's ulting. This can save your allies. I don't recommend leaving out wards however. Now at this point you have a lot of flexibility. In fact, even at the start you have a lot of flexibility. There have been games when I've been forced to lane, so I've gone straight into a Windcarver blade, followed up by a second Windcarver. That's a rare scenario, but it shows you don't be afraid to mix up the build order and adapt it to your situation. I'm giving you a general direction of how you should be building in most of your games. So at this point you can save up for your Shockwave or build into physical or energy armor with the quantum casing and Etherweave mesh. I like taking one armor card if my team are behind, but I feel like if there are a lot of team fights happening, I will go for my Shockwave. Generally you want your Shockwave as soon as possible. Remember, you only need 6 card points because if you went for a strike token you can discard that for the 7th point. I feel like Shockwave is a game-changing card. Getting that earlier will definitely help your team, so I try to rush it as quickly as possible unless I absolutely 100% need armor. Also try and slot in your first 3 actives into 1, 3 and 4. Keep the second slot free for Shockwave. I bind my first and second slot to buttons on my mouse, so that may help you as well. On PS4 I'm not too sure, but that's just a little tip for you guys on PC. The point is, put Shockwave in a slot that you can reach the fastest because you never know when you might need it. The rest of the build from here is pretty simple. You focus on building the armor you need the most. I recommend completing both the Etherweave mesh and quantum casing before moving on to the tuned barrier and tempered plate, because the cooldown reduction and the maxed bonus from these cards are a vital part of this build. Remember, you can switch out the Windcarver blade for the tempered plate or tuned barrier if you want more damage. Don't forget to complete your Lord's Ward as well. Now you've got the build, let's talk abilities. If I'm duo laning, I take his force shield first. This allows me to stop the enemy team getting last hits and interrupts their farm, hopefully giving my lane partner an advantage. I then take his charge ability because this is great for clearing waves and does a chunk of damage to enemy heroes. I prioritize my charge over all my other abilities except for my ultimate of course. I don't really like Steel's shield block ability, so sometimes I will unlock it and other times I'll just focus on my charge. Definitely unlock and upgrade Steel's ultimate when possible. Okay, so you've got the build and the build order, now let's talk gameplay. At the start of the game, like I mentioned previously, you want to try and interrupt the enemy's farm. Let your carries focus on getting last hits while you disrupt the enemy hero in your lane. CXP is shared 100% between 2 of you, so you have nothing to worry about. I often rotate into the jungle as well to get myself to level 5 as quickly as possible because Steel's ultimate really does guarantee you some kills if you can land it. I always stay in the jungle near my carry though because he could get ganked and I can quite easily defend him. Don't forget to use your Scout Ward as well to help him out. Now as Steel, you might find you're supporting allies in different lanes. It's important that you don't roam too much to the point that it's costing you farm. I often see Steels rotating a lot but really not getting enough farm. If you're going to rotate loads, you need to guarantee the kill and most likely clear the jungle en route to keep up your farm. In this clip here, you'll notice that my team are fighting in the jungle. These are the type of engagements you should take as Steel, but avoid if you're any other hero. His ultimate and narrow paths like the jungle mean that the enemies have little chance to escape it. As you can see, I'm able to catch 4 heroes in my ultimate, and you always want to try and follow up with your charge and push them back into your team so they can finish them off. I use my Shockwave as Gideon ult and we pick off 3 heroes, but it could have easily been 5. Steel is also great at defending towers. The important thing here though is not to force anything. Enemies are pushing our in here, but we can easily turn this around. The enemy team are distracted, so I use my ultimate, following up again with a charge on the carry to knock him back away from his allies. I try to get into Murdoch's face so my carry can kill him. If my carry dies, this could be trouble, so definitely try and protect your carries. You really want to make sure you land your ult in these situations. One wrong move could prove costly, so don't rush, be patient and find the right moment to use it. When fighting heroes that have an escape like Twin Blast, you probably want to avoid using your ultimate so early because they can easily dodge it. I wait for Rampage to come in, and then once Twin Blast uses his rocket dash, I make my move. I use my ultimate to guarantee the kill, and this is something I definitely advise you to do, especially in the early game when there are less team fights. Late game, it also might be beneficial to use your ultimate on a single hero if need be, because you'll get it back in no time with the cooldown reduction, and killing the enemy hero will often mean they're out for 60 to 70 seconds. Now 90% of the time I prefer to Shockwave and then use my ultimate. This guarantees that my ultimate is going to land on the enemy heroes, but sometimes you have to use your ultimate first and then follow up with a Shockwave. My team are about to lose the right tower, but I land my ultimate on 3 of the heroes. My Decker containment fences the Grux and Steel, and I use my charge to disrupt them, doing more damage to the tower. I also use my Shockwave for the same reason. Neither of us have the damage, so it's important we force tower aggro on the enemy heroes. We take down Steel, Grux, and the tower kills off Grim, and we also manage to kill the Decker before she gets our tower. We were lucky that the tower didn't go down, but we did everything right to defend it. Use your abilities and combo them together with Shockwave for maximum effectiveness. Also, don't forget to use your Force Shield to block ranged damage to the tower like I did there against Grim. Now this is why I love Shockwave and Steel's ult. Decker and Twin Blast both have good escapes, so I use my Shockwave and then ult immediately, destroying them instantly. They can't use their abilities while knocked up, and by the time they come down, a big ass Steel is whacking them back into the ground. I hope you enjoyed this guide. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below and I'll do my best to answer them. You can check out other guides on my channel and I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this build. Until next time guys, she's got the damage, she's got the looks, and now she has the escape. And by escape, I mean blink charm.